that's when life kind of took a left, right? They told me to get rich, but they didn't tell me what is rich? How much is rich? They told me to like buy a house, but they didn't tell me when to get a house. Like, I don't know if should I pay 20% down? Should I pay 3% down? I don't know what banks to get, what credit cards to get. Um, and I think even more importantly, like, I don't know what makes me happy. I don't know what I should prioritize in life. I don't know what I should be doing right now. All those questions kind of you know, just kind of piled up. And every single conversation that I have with other 20-year-olds, we kind of really bond over the fact that your 20s is just like decision paralysis. It's making decisions and making sacrifices at every single turn without a guidebook or without anyone telling you what to do. Welcome to 20s in Progress, episode 1. What am I doing? That's kind of good, Steven. To be honest with you, I really don't know what I'm doing. But then again, is that not your 20s? Welcome to 20s in Progress with Stephen Ha. I'm your host, Stephen Ha, a 25-year-old just trying to figure it out, who's talking to other 20-year-olds also trying to figure it out. And so you probably started listening to this podcast because you're in your 20s trying to figure out certain things, whether that's your early 20s, your mid 20s like me, or your late 20s, and you're trying to find a wife or a husband or kids. Ew. But this podcast is not supposed to be prescriptive of what to do or when to do it, but rather just helpful tips from other 20-year-olds who are going through different things in different stages of our lives. Hopefully, what this does for you is provide you a space to know that you're not the only person going through what you're going through. And, all of us in a comforting way is just trying to figure it out. And so hopefully you could use this podcast as a way to get tips, find community, and find people that just get it. And so I'm super excited about this journey that we're about to embark on. And yeah, I'm excited for you to meet all the people that are lined up to join this podcast and who are all my friends who happen to be in their 20s as well, trying to figure out different things in their lives. But yeah, this season's going to be 10 episodes, 10 different interviews, or 9 different interviews, because episode 1 will be with me, your host, Stephen Ha. But yeah, 9 conversations with 9 different people, try to just, talk about different things that they're going through in their 20s. And hopefully you stay along for the journey. And yeah, 20s in Progress, episode 1 with Stephen Ha. Still working on the title, but let's start there. Your 20s, at least from my experience, has been interesting. You think it's going one way and it never actually goes that way. I guess a quick introduction about me. My name is Stephen Ha. I'm 25 years old, originally from Houston, went to Howard and graduated from Howard in 2022. Proud HU alum. At the time I'm recording this is actually our homecoming, so happy HOCO, friends and family. And yeah, I'm originally from a single parent household. My mom had me and my little sister at a very young age. She had me when she was 19. She had my sister when she was 21. And so my entire life has always been kind of crazy. But I think 20s in particular started off crazy, given that, well, I started my 20s in the middle of a pandemic and we were not allowed to talk to people. So I spent the first year of my 20s not talking to anybody other than my friends over FaceTime. And I think that was I should have known then that it was a huge marker for what the rest of my 20s will be like. But I will start off with saying I don't regret a single thing. I think the first kind of like 20s tip, call it, is that everything in your life and in your 20s is meant to happen. And I think the quicker you accept that and the quicker you kind of just embrace that and find joy in it, the easier it will be. So like I said, I started my 20s in a pandemic. I had recently just lost a student election. If those of you who go to Howard and are listening to this, you know how intense those are. I had also just recently gone through a huge kind of like traumatic experience where I lost a lot of my friends and, I was really just alone, and I was back at home for the first time in 2 years and just trying to figure out what to do in this pandemic, and where, social distancing was a thing. You can't really talk to people. And I was just kind of at home, just, watching movies, and just kind of like really with myself, not really having a lot of people to talk to, just kind of with myself all the time. Mm, and kind of just like, as I take you through the rest of my 20s, I met a wonderful woman, got into a relationship at the early 2021. And so that's also how I spent my early 20s, from 21 to 24, really. I turned 21 in that relationship. So I was in a long-term relationship, lived with her, experienced all those things that you have to learn, while being in a relationship that young, that early, and, living together. And we like moved in together 6 months into knowing each other and dating, which is crazy. I don't recommend, or I mean, I guess you can say I do recommend. It was a beautiful time, and I learned a lot. And like I said at the beginning of this, like, I don't regret anything. I think everything that I did in my 20s had a purpose, and learning lessons from each one of those things. And so yeah, I was in a relationship in my early 20s. I turned 21 in that relationship. I graduated in that relationship. I got my first big boy job in that relationship. Moved to 2 different cities, 2 different states in that relationship. And I think that was really kind of like what defined my early 20s. Then after I graduated Howard in 22, I started a career at a consulting company for reasons that I cannot say, or else I will have to kill you. I cannot. Well, maybe if you are stalking and you want to look at my LinkedIn, you can see where I work. But yeah, I got a management consulting job, strategy consulting at one of the big three. And that's kind of where the other part of my 20s has been defined. Is I worked for 3 years at one of the hardest companies in the world, which on one end, it was challenging and exhausting and really kind of challenged me, not only in just in a professional way, but also a mental way of trying to figure out, my 20s. I was also grateful for the experience. And I think that also has really defined the rest of my 20s as I look towards the rest of my career, and even where I am right now. It is a huge kind of part of my life. And so, yeah, I'm currently doing a 6-month externship with the National Football League, as you can see in the back. So that's my 20s. I think it has been encapsulated by love, heartbreak, friendship loss, career changes, career pivots, career defining moments. And I think that's kind of what inspired this podcast. Is as I was going through my 20s, I was just like, dang, is this what your 20s is supposed to be? Coming from a single parent, immigrant, first generation like household, a lot of these conversations weren't had. We were just told, go find a job. Well, let's start off in high school, right? In high school, in the 4 years you were in high school, they said, hey, get good grades, do extracurricular so that you can get into a good college and then get as much, scholarships and less student loans as much as possible. And then when you get to college, no one tells you how to navigate college, right? No one tells you, here's how to go to a doctor when you're living away from home. Here's what to do about budgeting because groceries. And this is in 2018. Groceries in 2025 is even more insane than what it was in 2018. But even in 2018, I had to budget and try to figure out what it meant to be away from home for the first time. But I think the 20s in particular, especially once you get to your mid-20s, become extremely difficult because while in college, all they tell you to do is, hey, like, get good grades here, get your internships, and then get a good paying job at the end of this. But then once those 4 years are gone, there is no blueprint for the rest of your 20s. You don't know where to go, what to do, when to do it, how to do it, when should I buy a house, should I get a Roth IRA or a 401k, should I make this career change, should I prioritize money over work-life balance, should I prioritize my friends over my family, what about relationships, I'm getting old, so, my body clock is ticking, I need to have kids and get married soon, but I can't find anyone because Hinge sucks. And that really just becomes the epitome of your 20s, is that there is no blueprint. There's no guidebook to tell you here's what to do and when to do and how to do it. You just kind of figure it out. And I think in my early 20s, I really struggled with that fact. As a person, as you can probably have seen in my career, as like I was listing out my resume, I do best with very clear instructions, right? You told me in high school to get good grades. I was class president. I had a decent GPA. I got into Howard with a few scholarships. And Howard is a prestigious university. I was in DC. I was going to do this politics thing. And during my 20s, or during that time during college, like as soon as I turned 20, actually, that's when I started like all the questions of, okay, well, what do I do about my career? Should I stay in this politics stuff? Really just kind of like started the ball. And I think what I've realized, especially now at 25, is that like, at Howard, I was like, hey, like, they're telling me to get good grades. I had a decent GPA. I got a really good paying job from a top tier company. And I was like, I'm set. And then that's when life kind of took a left, right? They told me to get rich, but they didn't tell me what is rich? How much is rich? They told me to like buy a house, but they didn't tell me when to get a house. Like, I don't know if I, should pay 20% down. Should I pay 3% down? I don't know what banks to get, what credit cards to get. I think even more importantly, like, I don't know what makes me happy. I don't know what I should prioritize in life. I don't know what I should be doing right now. All those questions kind of just kind of piled up. And every single conversation that I have with other 20-year-olds, we kind of really bond over the fact that your 20s is just like decision paralysis. It's making decisions and making sacrifices at every single turn without a guidebook or without anyone telling you what to do. And I think it becomes even harder when you're someone like me who, shout out my mom and shout out my family, and it's no diss to them, but, you know, they experienced life in a different way. My mom immigrated here when she was like 15, 16. And so she really doesn't know, and when she was 20, when she was 25, she was raising two kids. And so I think as much as she tries, can't really give me advice on how to navigate corporate America, how to navigate life, being 25 in this time. And so I think your 20s becomes even harder when you don't really have anyone to lean on except other 20-year-olds. And so I think that's what really inspired this podcast was the more 20-year-olds I talk to, whether that's at work or even friends or just people in the streets, especially now that I live in New York, and just talking to random people on the subway, which I know anyone who's listening to this who's actually from New York is calling Cap and saying, are you really talking to strangers on the subway? And if you are, why are you being weird? But I just know that like as I talk to other 20-year-olds, we're all, especially people who come from unique backgrounds and challenged backgrounds like me, we really don't have a plan, and each one of us is trying to figure out our own unique thing at any particular time. Some people are dealing with love, some people are dealing with careers about, am I being paid what I'm worth? Some people are saying, hey, like, I want to get married soon, but I haven't responded to anybody on Hinge. Like, there's a lot of questions and a lot of, decisions to be made, and hopefully this podcast, again, at the top, I said this, like, doesn't give you the blueprint, but rather gives you kind of questions and helpful tips along the way for you to kind of create your own journey. Because, if there's anything that you take away from this podcast, and even this episode in particular, is that you cannot follow anybody's blueprint, especially in your 20s. Everyone's 20s is unique and special to them. And the quicker you accept that and embrace that, the better you will be, and the more exciting and happy your 20s actually becomes. And so, like I said, I'm super excited about this journey that we're about to embark on. 20s in Progress has been something that has been on my mind, on my heart, on my spirit, and I'm excited to kind of really tell you guys more about my journey, whether that is my spiritual journey that I've been on in the last year, whether that is my love journey and heartbreak journey that I will say I'm still going through, and even just, new friends, old friends that I've kind of lost along the way, existing friends that have really just like taken a different shape. I'm excited to talk about that. I'm excited to talk about my career, or, where I'm going, where I've been, and where I'm supposed to go, question mark. I don't know. But yeah, 20s in Progress is a special project, and hopefully you find it as helpful and comforting for you as it will be for me. So yeah, subscribe to 20s.inprogress on Instagram and on TikTok. This episode will also drop on Spotify. So if you bookmark it on Spotify, you'll get a notification for every time we drop an episode. We will be dropping new episode every Saturday. Don't know the time yet. I'm not going to lie to you, but Just keep in mind, we'll be dropping an episode every single Saturday with a different conversation with a different 20-year-old going through a different thing. And so, yeah, this episode will drop November 1st, and I'm excited for you to hear what I have to say. So, thank you all. Love you all. Peace out.